To explain Rosymorn Monastery, I need to take you back to 916 DR, almost 1,000 years before the events of Baldur's Gate 3. Samaster, a lich with a nightmare history, was on a journey to attempt to personally convince 2 dragons to become Draco-liches. Draco-liches would be a formidable enemy to those who fought on the side of light, so a coalition of harpers and Lathander clergy were ready and waiting for Samaster when he appeared near the village of Hap. Lathander, the god of dawn, hope and beginnings, could not allow Samaster to succeed in his mission. Things got so dire that the god intervened personally, fighting Samaster through his own mortal avatar, Lathander's power made manifest in flesh and blood on the material plane, and wielding power channeled directly from the god. During their fight, Samaster was vanquished, but not before managing to strike the avatar of the Morning Lord, shedding some precious drops of his godly blood. Drops of blood fell from the avatar's wound and struck the earth, and a holy relic was born, the blood of Lathander, his ruby red drops preserved in a chunk of amber by his faithful clerics. Dawnmaster Dover built a chapel in Hap to house the holy blood and commemorate the site where it fell. Dawnmasters are the most esteemed members of Lathander's clergy and are given direct responsibilities that involve leading Lathander's most faithful and pursuing the faith propagating itself in whatever region the Dawnmaster happens to be situated in. Dawnmaster Dover, therefore, was in stewardship of the chapel and the blood itself when, somehow, the holy relic was stolen. I don't know exactly how this happened. In later records, Dawnmaster Vased says that they can't believe the blood of Lathander was left out in the open, so it may have been as easy as stealing in during the dead of night and seizing the relic from its reliquary, where it was proudly displayed to any visitor of Hap. Saying it was stolen during the dead of night isn't just a turn of phrase in this example, you can actually take it literally, as Sharon's the one who sees the relic from under Dawnmaster Dover's nose. There's no better time to steal a holy relic to please Shar, the goddess of night and darkness, than when utter darkness has fallen over the Morning Lord Lathander's sanctum. Shar and Lathander despise each other. Not only are they gods of opposing dominions, dawn and night respectively, but Shar favours ignorance and secrets over creativity and creation, the latter of which is Lathander's purview. Hence, stealing a relic of Lathander's is something Shar would definitely approve of, and in the endless petty back and forth between gods in the Forgotten Realms, this would definitely have been seen as a point in Shar's favour. With the blood of Lathander in the hands of Sharon's, Dawnmaster Dover was devastated and humiliated. In the religious tome, His Holy Blood Volume 1, Dover only uses the pronoun we to describe the failure of safeguarding the holy relic, so to me this sounds like he was trying to shirk some of the blame for the theft. This attitude would explain why the blood was stolen in the first place if Dover doesn't take individual responsibility or interest in the safekeeping of such a holy relic. Instead, it makes it rather easy for him to blame it on other members of the clergy, when really he himself as Dawnmaster should have personally made sure that the relic couldn't be snatched. Indeed, even though it was kept out in the open for some reason. Dover writes in His Holy Blood that they were tasked with locking their gazes eternally on the blood. I wagered this is metaphorical, though maybe if Dover had taken Lathander's command literally, there would have been guardians to prevent the blood from being stolen in the first place. Dover interprets this theft as a test from Lathander, and chose Paladin Vased to find and return the relic. Guessing why Dover didn't send himself, I would say that the shame on his part prevented him from venturing forth, but he may also have just been too old at that point to go on this crusade himself. He tries to make up for his failing by capitalising a ton of words in His Holy Blood Volume 1 just to prove how zealous he is, honestly, because would anyone with a casual faith put this many capitalised words in their testimony? I think not. He writes, and I'll put emphasis on the capitalised words, "His radiance has faded from our unworthy gazes, O ye lightless wretches. We have failed the Morning Lord, and I record that failing in the pages of this tome. To think he once stood in our imperfect world among us imperfect mortals and felled the villain Samaster with his holy brilliance. He bled for us, brethren, and we were tasked with locking our gazes eternally upon his blood. We let those gazes falter, and the blood was taken, wrenched from our sight. It is a test, one this chapel is duty-bound to undertake. I pass the keeping of this record along to Paladin Vased, chosen in light to find the relic. Paladin, when you look upon the blood, I pray Lathander honours your deeds by burning out your eyes. Okay, Dover, whatever. On Paladin Vased's shoulders fell the responsibility to find the blood of Lathander. As a paladin, he had already proved himself worthy in both fight and faith, making him ideal for this holy crusade. Vased sounds a lot more grounded in comparison to Dover in Volume 2 of his Holy Blood, a byproduct of his time on the battlefield, most likely. The very first line of his Holy Blood Volume 2 is, "While mine eyes remained unscorched, we have made great progress in finding his lost blood." When I read that for the first time, it sounded to me like Vased would say it with the same dry sarcasm as Vimes from Discworld, poking gentle fun at the pretentious nature of Dover's writing. Vased tracked the Sharon thieves throughout Faerun, west from the Dalelands all the way to the Sword Coast. For over a month he gained on their trail. It was only due to an accident, though, that he became certain that they were the ones who were carrying the holy relic. One night they dropped the cargo trunk carrying the blood, and Vased wrote the entire riverbank was aflame with a soothing radiance, the same rosy light of a summer dawn. I could practically hear his morning song bouncing between the valley walls. Light shone forth from the blood of Lathander, which was, apparently, very poorly secured by those who had stolen it. A Sharon outpost was keeping the holy relic within its walls, and I think this may have been a satellite stronghold of Shar worship in Wraithwyn. I have a full video all about Wraithwyn's worship of Shar and the role that Ketheric Thorm played in its destruction, so if you want to know more about why I'm pretty sure that Wraithwyn and Shar are linked, you can watch that video on my channel right now. Vased ambushed the Sharon outpost with his battle axe held high, and brought Lathander's rosy golden glory of dawn to destroy them. In desperation to destroy the holy relic before it could be reclaimed by the Lady of Loss's enemy, one Sharon hit the amber with a mace of pure void, likely a gift from the Lady of Loss herself. This strike split the amber, and the exposed blood burnt the Sharon horde to ash, washing harmlessly over Lathander's faithful, Vased among them. As the amber encasing the blood was damaged by this mace of pure void, it became far too volatile to transport back to Hap and the chapel where it used to be housed. Vased knew that they had to find some way to preserve it with minimal interference, and to protect it from being stolen ever again. Along with his clerics, Vased built a simple chapel around the amber. With the help of some very talented and very brave blacksmiths, the holy blood was encased within a mace, which fittingly had spikes jutting out from its centre, much like the rising sun of dawn that symbolised Lathander. The paladin then set about the much larger task of building what we now know as Rosymorn Monastery. Eventually, Vased's devotion was recognised by the wider Lathanderian clergy, and he was anointed Dawnmaster to watch over the growing Rosymorn Monastery and the relic it housed. From the very beginning of Rosymorn Monastery, Vased intended the humble chapel to become an estate for worship. In his Holy Blood, Volume 3, he writes, "To keep it from the lustful sacrilege of thievery, our simple chapel will become a great monastery, and the blood shall be secreted away with a great many more wiles than it was before." At the beginning of the same volume, Vased uses the we pronoun correctly, not to shift blame, but instead to share glory. He writes, "For my sins, it only just occurred to me that I had lacked in my record keeping of late, but then we have been busy." He then goes on to list the outcome of the fight and the building of the chapel. The victory over the Sharons is depicted by Vased as a triumph of the many, ensuring that he didn't take all of the glory for himself. Dawnmaster Dover, take note. Vased learnt from Dover's mistakes and secreted the mace underground, protected by traps and tricks. He included another little dig at Dover when noting how the blood needed to be protected, writing, "I find it hard to fathom that we left such an artifact in such an obvious open space to begin with. Alas, his light singes away the mistakes of the past, leading to a more fortuitous dawn indeed." Vased would eventually become famous enough to have parables written about him, tales of his achievements immortalised in stories and popularised, which is a great way to spotlight worship of Lathander to bolster his devotees' ranks. Rosymorn would be built into the trail to Crag's mountain pass, its natural defences leveraged to protect the monastery and therefore the holy relic hidden within. A chasm underneath the main building was built into anti-theft traps. An abbess of Rosymorn inscribed a warning to any intruders from proceeding further, if they even managed to make it under the cloisters in the first place. Rosymorn's greatest deterrent was on the roof, the Dawnstar, a beacon to Lathander's faithful, and a horrifyingly powerful weapon of solar might. From the outside, the Dawnstar looked like a defensive measure to dissuade Sharons from even looking in the direction of Rosymorn. Truly though, the Dawnstar was part of a hidden mechanism that would cause the destruction of the entire monastery if the blood of Lathander was stolen ever again. Without the correct safeguards in place via the Dawnmaster crest, when the mace was detached from its pedestal, the building would crumble in on itself, destroying the thieves and protecting the holy relic for good underneath a shattered mountain. With the blood sealed behind multiple chasms, a puzzle, and a keystone failsafe that could only be found by someone who knows about the Dawnmasters of Lathander, it would remain safe for centuries and eventually become somewhat of a legend throughout Faerun. The real blood would remain safe for centuries, I should say. Learning from the mistakes of the past, the Lathanderian clergy had a fake replica made of the amber relic. This relic was proudly displayed in the apse of the monastery right in front of the narthex doors. Finding out names for different parts of cathedrals is so fun, seriously. And pilgrims journeyed from far and wide to worship what they thought was the genuine article. When Tav finds something that looks suspiciously like the holy blood of Lathander, they pick it up and are confused that it doesn't feel that ancient or holy, because it's not. But the pilgrims who came to worship the chunk of ordinary but still beautiful amber would be none the wiser and all the happier to think that they had come within mere feet of the blood of their god. One of the pilgrims was a mad monk before they fell to madness, whose name we would never be sure of. Rosymorn Monastery was overseen by a parade of Dawnmasters. Their deeds would be immortalised in stone plaques within Rosymorn's dome, and their likenesses preserved in stained glass, just like Lathander is all around his monastery. First there was Vased, and then Seed, who led the reconsecration of Rosymorn. It's my belief that the monastery was reconsecrated when it had finished being built, so that the entire structure, and not just the acorn of the chapel from which it had grown, could be blessed as a holy site. The next two Dawnmasters were Stockhold and Welkin-Glory, and I don't really know which one came first. Welkin-Glory is the one I know the least about, and may have been the Dawnmaster who kept the lowest profile, as all that's written on their commemorative plaque is "Dawnmaster Welkin-Glory beckons forth the rising sun in Lathander's name." Beckoning forth the rising sun is a pretty normal duty for any worshipper of Lathander, so I like to imagine personally that Welkin-Glory was a humble person who kept their head down and themselves busy with the mundane but still important responsibilities that a functional monastery demanded. Dawnmaster Askel Stockhold led Evensong, a Lathanderian religious ceremony similar to the real-life Evensong, I assume, before the Zenith Day, which must have been a significant enough event to bear mentioning when it came to commemorating Stockhold. Stockhold was a tiefling, and there are signs that before he became a Dawnmaster, he was a formidable paladin just like Vased. His plaque indicates that he wielded many humble maces as he purged evil from the land, and maces were so important to him and his reputation that he was actually buried with one in a grave that overlooked Rosymorn. No other Dawnmaster has been laid to rest in the grounds of the monastery, and from this I assume that Stockhold was particularly attached to Rosymorn. The peace of its halls would have been quite the contrast to the battlefield. Signs of Lathander's blessing bloomed on the trail to Rosymorn. Patches of autumn crocus led to the monastery, a flower that was created by Lathander and whose petals stretched towards the dawning sun in honour of the rose and gold god. As part of making Rosymorn a destination frequented by monks, pilgrims, tourists and the curious alike, a ferry was built to cross the ravine leading down into the monastery. It didn't take long for it to be put to use plenty, as pilgrims absolutely flocked to Rosymorn to worship and see its majesty for themselves. Lathander granted many boons, chief among them of creativity and fertility. Couples who wanted to conceive a child would come to seek his blessing, but the draw of seeing the blood of a god wasn't enough to bring even the most casual of worshippers to Rosymorn. The monastery quickly became a famous site of pilgrimage. At the end of it, a chunk of amber with 3 drops of blood suspended within that many prostrated themselves in front of in prayer. Immediately upon entering the temple, visitors would be faced with it, placed on an altar in front of an imposing statue of the Bringer of Dawn. Inside the monastery was a hubbub of activity as monks, novices and clergy went about their business, tending to the monastery's wares and its study. A library, winery, dormitory, study halls and large kitchens all catered to the monks. Outside, multiple fountains babbled with water drawn up from underground springs, wispweed growing in their shallows. One of Rosymorn's biggest exports was fire wine. Underneath the library, monks brewed grapes into Rosymorn fire wine, and Gale indicates that the monastery also used to produce a wonderful ale. The smell of the wine must have wafted into the entire west wing. It must have smelled amazing. While the wine could be purchased with gold, Rosymorn also allowed visitors to trade for bottles of wine. A large donation was worth 10 bottles, herbs 5 bottles, a cooking pan 1 bottle, I would have loved to see the state that cooking pan was brought in, 3 bottles for some gold and 2 bottles for a cat? It was a strange cat. One novice saw it grow to the size of a humongous hound before snapping back to normal size. This wasn't because the novice had indulged in a bit too much fire wine tasting. The cat was actually no cat at all. It was a Grimishka. Grimishkas are monstrosities, unlike cats, who are angels, as we all know, and are created when spellcasters try to create any form of life and their incantation goes wrong. Grimishkas feast on magic both latent in the air and in written form, and have what can be described as an allergy to magic. Using any within the vicinity of one Grimishka can cause wild magic adjacent effects. They are also unnervingly smart and mimic the cry of babies or wounded animals in order to lure people into isolated spots. Grimishkas thrive on unstable magic and can quickly become an infestation by multiplying when they're near very powerful magic sources. Sources like the blood of a god, for example. Evidently, the monks weren't successful in ridding themselves of that single Grimishka, as by the time of the Githyanki raid, there was still at least one hiding in the library, enjoying the potent but distant magic of the blood of Lathander. Rosymorn wasn't falling in popularity when the Githyanki attacked, it's important to make that clear. Its meticulously kept visitor log doesn't show any kind of decrease in visitors. A guest book was available for pilgrims to write about their impressions of Rosymorn, and its pages are filled with different reasons people had for treading through its doors. Some were depressed and sought Lathander's light, others visited as part of an annual Kythorn pilgrimage, which is the month that the summer solstice falls within, making it fitting to visit a god of the dawn during such a journey. Others note the friendliness of the monks, the impressive stained glass windows, and one of the jewels in its crown was the ceremonial Dawnmaster weapons. They were on display in the apex of the monastery, and blacksmiths came from all around to appreciate their intricate metalwork. It's commendable that pilgrims were even allowed to wander with such freedom throughout Rosymorn's halls, though with the sheer amount of monks within its walls, there was an inbuilt surveillance system. And you have to assume that no one would dare steal from right underneath a god's nose, especially not one that showcased ceremonial weapons and had the Dawn Star on its roof. Among all the different pilgrims was a couple praying for a child who visited the monastery every 10 days to seek Lathander's blessing. There was also Harrison Fields, father to Elliot and Luke, who left a prayer to ask Lathander to watch over them. One especially sweet part of his prayer reads, "I'm poor as muck, but have some heart left to give, that which has not been eaten up by the boys and their mum, so that bit is yours if you keep them seeing sunrises." Another prayer is from an elderly woman who's thankful for the kindnesses that have been shown to her on her way to the monastery and beyond. She speaks to Lathander like an old friend, calling him dearie and writing as if she's catching up a neighbour on what she's been up to. Her bedroll became infested with bedbugs, and another woman gave her a spare despite having 2 children of her own to tend to. Her prayer ends with, "Thanks for pouring your honey heat over each and every day, cloudy or no, here for a lone woman barefoot and smiling on the long road." When she says honey heat, this woman is referring to the morning light falling like honey on the road, thick and slow. It's another beautiful turn of phrase. Every prayer left at the monastery is written in a tone that's markedly opposite to that of Dawnmaster Dover, with no pretense whatsoever. Pilgrims didn't pretend to be equals to Lathander, but they spoke to him like one would speak to a friend, and when you compare it to the way that pilgrims and worshippers spoke to other gods in Baldur's Gate 3, I find this incredibly refreshing. One monk that visited Rosymorn would be encountered by Tav centuries later. He visited Rosymorn to worship at the altar, and at some point upon his departure he was captured by Sharons. Perhaps they were trying to find out all they could about Rosymorn to ascertain where the blood was being kept. The monk was versed in using ki for martial ends, which sounds like it may have been traditional for Lathanderian monks to study. Each Dawnmaster trained in mastering a specific weapon, so it would make sense if the lower ranks of monks trained in martial arts with a similar fervour. The Sharons tortured the monk, but he was stout in his faith. The more pain they subjected him to, the more he laughed at their pathetic attempts to get him to spurn his god. He found it hilarious that they thought pain would make him give up Lathander. He gradually descended into madness because he didn't know where the relic was, but he was sure that he wasn't going to give any kind of information that could give up the one he worshipped, and he was laughing all the while. Upon his death, the Sharons cursed him to an eternity of mad laughter, trapping his spirit in the amulet he was wearing when he was perished. The monk would remark later that he laughed at the pain till ne'er couldst I stop. Is there affliction more terrible than eternal joy? This is my pleasure, this is my curse. Twisted, the Sharon Inquisitor kept the amulet as a trophy. One of her foolish Dark Inquisitors stole it to try and use its power to help Ketheric Thorm, but was overcome by the monk's mad laughter. Yanked off of their neck by that Inquisitor, it was locked in an adamantine chest and remained there in the dark for years. Before his death, or during his time as a spirit, I can't be sure, the monk found out that his granddaughter Shira had pledged herself to Ilmater. Ilmater is the god of martyrdom, perseverance, and suffering. As one of his devout, Shira would be beholden to take on the suffering of others, making her the perfect inheritor of the monk's laughter. She would be freeing her grandfather from a curse and worshipping her god simultaneously. Shira would become the monk's quarry, but this appears to have been stripped of malice. He genuinely thought he was doing both of them a service. This wasn't a way to get revenge on his granddaughter for not worshipping Lathander. When Tav uses their insight to look deeper into the monk's intentions, they see that beneath the rampant joy you sense the monk's fear and sincerity. He doesn't wish to harm you, but that doesn't mean he won't. Something nefarious had worked its way into Shira's father, and it might be a remnant of the curse that his own father suffered. It's possible that somehow he got his hands on the amulet before the Sharons reclaimed it, and the amulet drove him slowly mad, or perhaps he merely sensed his father's mad spirit. Shira wrote in her memoirs about her father's attempt to dissuade his daughter to turning to Ilmater from Lathander. Moving from the light is how he always phrased it, which I thought was a bit much. A ray of morning light dims this day, he would insist. I just can't really see it the same way. I can comfort, I can listen, I can heal. Of course my talents are best suited in worship of Ilmater. I worry too. There's something that glimmers in Par's eyes when he talks about the light, and it's not something I like. I alight to Baldur's Gate the next 10 day, to the Open Hand Temple. Maybe they'll know what ails him. When Shira eventually made it to Ilmater's Open Hand Temple in Rivington, she stayed there until her death decades later. I cannot ascertain whether she cured whatever ailed her father, or even figured out what it was. One final point about the monk. If his spirit perishes without being cleansed of his laughter, Lathander will not accept him into the realm of the Eternal Sun, which I'm pretty sure is the afterlife for those who worship Lathander, though if you know what one it is for sure, please do comment and let me know. The Morning Lord turns from his monk who endured such torture but still refused to give him up. It's an unpleasant reminder that gods can be harsh in the extreme. I'm about halfway through telling you all about Rosymorn Monastery, so if you're enjoying the video, please do like and subscribe to my little lore channel. I also have a Patreon and you can get videos on there 2 days early, as long as viewing them completely ad-free, and get a shout out at the end of my videos. I also just want to say real quick, loads of channels are using AI at the moment and I absolutely detest it. I have never, will never, and would never use AI on this channel. I write all of my scripts from scratch, and if you are a patron at, I think it's £10+ a month, you get access to all of my scripts for every video. They are all written by me, down to every last word. I edit and film and do all of that stuff myself. I don't use AI for thumbnails, and it honestly grosses me out when creators use AI. AI is bad. I don't use it, so if you would also like to support a massively anti-AI channel who doesn't do AI voiceovers either, because they are just absolute hell to listen to, I would love it if you subscribed and liked this video. Anyway, back to Rosymorn. Rosymorn Monastery was in an envious location. Deep in the mountains, surrounded on all sides by sheer cliff faces, and with a formidable weapon mounted on its roof. It was being visited by pilgrims, monks, blacksmiths and ordinary folk, and from afar, Githyanki had laid their eyes on it. It's important I give you a bit of context about why the Githyanki even want Rosymorn Monastery in the first place. The Githyanki live in the astral plane. There they raid from ships, kill illithids and serve their queen Vlaakith. In the astral plane, time does not pass normally, so Githyanki do not age while they go about their business in the astral plane, and thus they require their young to hatch, train and pass into adulthood in the material plane, where time ticks on by. As they do not live in the material plane, Githyanki establish creches in secluded parts of Faerun. Creches are hatcheries for eggs, but they also train Githyanki children until they're ready to leave the creche and behead in a illithid themselves, marking their passage into adulthood and rendering them welcome to join the Githyanki in the astral plane. Creches are kind of akin to military training academies. They are brutal, unrelenting centres of learning for Githyanki children. Rosymorn, fortified with an underground complex, ample foraging nearby, little defence and an impressive weapon on top of it, was the perfect location for a creche. It wouldn't have bothered the Githyanki at all that it was a temple they were raiding, as Lae'zel says. In a creche there is purpose, in a temple only platitudes and unheard prayer. They wouldn't have cared at all that they could potentially be upsetting a god by destroying their monastery. The Dawnmaster's inner circle had become aware that Githyanki had been spotted nearby, and were trying not to panic. Rumours of Githyanki sightings trickled down slowly but surely to the monks in the temple. As Githyanki are essentially aliens to those who live in Faerun, no one would ever forget seeing one, no one would miss one in a crowd, and no one could stop the monks from gossiping about them. One monk wrote about the sighting rumours and was naive enough to express excitement at the idea of a Githyanki raid, because it would mean they would get to see the Dawnstar being fired. This monk was right to assume that the Githyanki wouldn't know what hit them if the Dawnstar was fired, but had a very misplaced confidence in assuming how easy it would be to even fire that thing. Ironically, the Githyanki launched their assault at dawn. Rosymorn was beset on all sides by Gith. They climbed through windows, skewered monks through their middle, tore walls apart, and Lathander's faithful fought back. One abbess used a magic mouth spell on a bust to issue commands while she fought on the front line. A brother Wellan barricaded themselves and other monks in their dormitories and summoned a guardian of faith to protect them. Like the Morning Lord in his monastery, the guardian is made out of gold and stained glass and is absolutely beautiful as it is deadly. Summoning a guardian of faith only takes verbal components. There's no somatic movements or materials required, and normally a guardian of faith would only last for 8 hours. So this guardian of faith remaining in place decades later is impressive. My personal theory about why the Guardian lasted this long is because the spell was a plea of faith from multiple people who had devoted their lives to Lathander in a building that housed his blood, and it also arose from dire need as they were under attack. All of those faith-based elements must have contributed to the Guardian being far more powerful than usual. The Guardian was needed as well because it was taking too long to power up the Dawnstar. The Githyanki fell back, and for a moment it looked like they had retreated for good. But then the Kithrak atop red dragons came. Mounted by Githyanki, their dragonfire annihilated any defences the monastery had left. The monks were destroyed by flame, some in the middle of worship to the blood itself. Walls shattered, and the Githyanki claimed Rosymorn Monastery as creche. The Githyanki took the remaining monks captive and tortured them for information about the monastery, but they didn't find out about the blood of Lathander. Any remaining monks were either killed or enslaved and shipped off to Tunarath, the Githyanki's capital city. Before they were cut, there was one remaining survivor of the Githyanki attack on Rosymorn. A Lathanderian monk who had survived so long courtesy of the fact that he was a vampire. A vampire worshipping the god of dawn might seem counterintuitive, but I interpret this as a vampire trying to atone for any evils they've committed. Worshipping a god of everything they should rally against, dawn, renewal, children, would be a means for a vampire to repent. Unfortunately, despite lots of digging, I can't find any more information about the vampire monk, Brother Vampire, as he's known in the Baldur's Gate 3 flags, so feel free to speculate in the comments about what you think his story would have been. The Githyanki gutted Rosymorn of any valuables, and once they sold the majority of them, the most impressive spoils were shipped back to Tunarath, where they could bring glory to Vlaakith's city-state. Gith have absolutely no regard for any civilizations or cultures outside of the Githyanki sphere. They take what is useful to them with no regard to preserving to any tradition or artistry that's in the way. Once they stripped the treasure room of its valuables, it became a military intelligence office, and yet other bits of Rosymorn remained as they had been when the monks walked its halls. The Grimishka infestation in the library was allowed to continue, as the Githyanki didn't consider the Grimishka any kind of threat, but foresaw that they would be a deterrent to anyone foolish enough to approach the monastery. Likewise, kobolds had set up a clan in the winery and were enjoying the alcohol there, and they would be allowed to remain, having been drawn to Rosymorn in the first place by the red dragons that occasionally appeared over the mountains. There are other hints in the game files that originally the kobolds also played a bigger role in Rosymorn Monastery. There's mentions of sending mechanics minions to the monastery library, maybe to take out the Grimishkas for Tav. There's also a way you can convince monastery roof kobolds that they're beneath you to get them to submit to you. You can also surrender to the monastery roof kobolds and then go to the creche captain, which implies that the roof kobolds might have been under the employ of the creche captain. And then we also know that there's a water kobold who was somehow sleeping by a bucket trap. Either way, this entire questline was cut, and the kobolds remain a kind of natural pest/vermin that's infesting the winery of the Rosymorn Monastery. Tav's arrival to Rosymorn is studded with Githyanki slates that list the takings and the establishment of the creche in the first place. They're scattered throughout the ruin and are indicative of the uncaring attitude of the Githyanki. Once something has served its purpose, it's discarded with zero sentimentality. This lack of curiosity that Githyanki exhibit means that they were right on top of a divine weapon the entire time the creche was running, without even realising it. If they had just poked around a tiny bit, they would have found the old maintenance records book, which gave a very strong hint that spinning statues were important to Rosymorn Monastery somehow, a way to access something precious hidden beneath, perhaps? This weapon, the Blood of Lathander, with its aura of divine light, would have been very useful in an assault against Moonrise Towers had Thérèse been allowed to conduct her raid as she wished. But anyway, after the monastery was taken over, a creche was established at Rosymorn. It is strangely empty by 1492. Only a single egg remains when the most recent crop of eggs should have been replaced as soon as the majority had hatched. No one should be waiting around for one last egg to hatch in the Githyanki world. Githyanki have absolutely no patience or mercy for their young, and for an egg to take longer to hatch marks it as weaker and therefore worthless. Lae'zel explains that in her creche Kalia, 3 dozen eggs were hatched at one time, but some creches can harbour hundreds of eggs. To hatch from the same clutch doesn't give any kind of sibling camaraderie, though, among the younger Gith. Lae'zel describes those who hatched from her clutch as her cousins, but she never knew who laid that egg she hatched from. Family is an entirely alien concept to the Githyanki. Family encourages some acknowledgement of the role an individual has in it, and as Lae'zel puts it, Githyanki seek might not for individual power, but for the good of the collective. To seek power for personal glory alone is a farce. Varsh Cuckoo, the caretaker of the eggs, is a rare exception. He prides himself on creating and taking care of Creche Elect's hatchery, despite being the last of his own clutch to hatch. He remembers the mercy his own Varsh showed him by not smashing his egg when he was the last to hatch. And, if you get his permission to take the one remaining egg, Cuckoo's protective side comes out, and he threatens to drown Tav in the burning waters of the hatchery's acid if the child comes to any harm. This is really unusual for Githyanki, and is the first hint that Creche Elect harbours many tiny rebellions. Once free of their eggs, Gith youth are put through a rigorous training schedule to become part of the militarised Githyanki society. As soon as they're able to walk, they have to clean, hunt, eradicate pests and vermin, ascend on surveillance, outings and patrols, taught in combat, weapon maintenance and armour polishing, and are taught how to speak Common as well as the Githyanki tongue. Taurus is an example of what generations of creches have done to Githyanki. If you proceed in the quest to get a Githyanki egg for the Society of Brilliance, you can meet Taurus in Act 3. He is the hatched Githyanki from the egg, and things are not all well. Everyone in the lodge is dead, and he is the only one who remains. Without strict training and a rigid structure, there's a small indication that a Githyanki's energies will become unfettered and unpredictable. Taurus is a Githyanki raised in isolation, and Lae'zel observes when she meets him that his blood boils like Vlaakith's, but he knows nothing of the protocols. By this, it sounds to me like Githyanki children are taught ways to manage their fiercely powerful emotions and all the latent psionic abilities that come with it. These protocols are probably ways that they can manage these kinds of outbursts, ones that Taurus are woefully ill-equipped to deal with. Childhood, if you could even call it that, in a creche is brutal. In Creche Kalia, the students cull their own ranks under the belief that they're only as strong as their weakest warrior. Lae'zel takes pride in how many of her own cousins she's killed because they challenged her to a fight or underestimated her. This isn't the case in Creche Elect, where the Savage, the teacher, demeans himself by beating the Gith boy in front of the other students, a duty which lowers his status in Lae'zel's eyes, as that should be a responsibility that students shoulder themselves. A Savage shouldn't be the one to kill or beat students who aren't doing what he wants. That responsibility is something that Githyanki are taught to embrace themselves, which is absolutely terrifying to think that one child could kill another simply because they think they're weak. Every single Githyanki has held a sword by age 6 and claims their first kill by age 10. During their time being raised in the creche, youths have zero privacy, as privacy breeds hobbies and introspection and opens up the danger of Githyanki developing an individual mindset. Cruelty is encouraged, so these Gith youth are permitted to throw around a Grimishka in a trunk, using it to practice their mage hand and also harden their hearts. Loads of wine can also be found scattered throughout the dormitory of creche. There's absolutely no sense that these Gith are children, so exposure to alcohol is just part of their life. Lae'zel tells Will that Mini Lae'zel wasn't sheltered. On Creche Kalir, very little is hidden behind doors, such as eating, sleeping and sex acts of all manner. Although Lae'zel views this as normal, it's sad to think that Gith children are spared no exposure to the wider world at such a young age, in such a formative time. Even to Lae'zel, to whom creche is too genial as there are cushions, bedrolls and curtains spread around the dormitory. Lae'zel even goes as far as to describe creche as too genial, just because there are cushions, bedrolls and curtains in the dormitory. I dread to think what Creche Kalir must have been like inside. Mind you, not even the Gustil, the doctor, has her own living space, as there are 2 bedrolls in her office, not just one. Near her bedroll is a Zaithisk purification device, which every creche has. Those who go in for purification rarely come out again, sent on patrols elsewhere, probably. Gish Umrak speaks about a cousin, Renthil. He was apparently examined in the Zaithisk recently. Haven't seen him since. Perhaps he got sent back to scout Moonrise. The implication here is something that Tav knows all too well. To step into a Zaithisk means that the mind flayer tadpole in your mind is wrenched out at the cost of your life. But to the Githyanki in the creche, those who aren't the Gustil, they must assume that the Gith who are put in the Zaithisk are simply put on another mission, as it's never told to them that the Githyanki actually died in the process. One of the first things I noticed about creche is that there are almost no books. The abundance of bookshelves makes this even more apparent, as their shelves are starkly empty. The only books to be found in creche are about psionic manipulations and countermeasures, a thorough account of how best to protect your mind from illithid manipulation and subsequent domination, as well as Broom and Bucket, which is about kobolds. Possibly from a Githyanki trying to learn about the kobolds in the winery and to distinguish whether they're actually a threat or not. Then in the dormitory there's also a slate engraved with the folly of Zerthamon, which is warning about why the Githyanki hate Githzerai and making sure that the Gith children don't look outside their people for any kind of validation. Strangely though, Creche Kalir has a library according to Lae'zel, apparently a gift from Vlaakith herself so that they may gain total understanding, but she declined to bless Creche Ilek with a library, and I do wonder why. With solely educational books available to anyone in the creche, absolutely no one is permitted any break from contemplating the illicit threat. Therefore, there's no time to think about yourself or your purpose outside of furthering Vlaakith's will, no matter what they're told that might be. Of course, this is just a transparent attempt to brainwash Githyanki youth and make sure they don't have any chance to develop an identity outside of worshipping Vlaakith. There's also a weird liminal energy around creche. Githyanki mill around, patrolling corridors, and those, apart from the youth, Zavash and Vash, seem to lack any kind of concrete purpose. They're on edge because of the Inquisitor's visit, but this waiting energy also comes from elsewhere. Githyanki have little culture of their own that isn't based around martial prowess. Their main activities are raiding, fighting, and training. Even their city-state, Tunarath, where Vlaakith resides, is outfitted in statues and relics and culture that's been stolen from other civilizations. The Githyanki lack a truly coherent identity, aside from their fanaticism for Vlaakith and hatred of illithids. Vlaakith even sometimes has trouble keeping the Githyanki stationed at Tunarath entertained. Should there not be enough opportunity for raids, the elders are subjected to elaborate trials by their queen to punish them for their decadence, which she tacitly endorses by outfitting Tunarath with the spoils of her empire. Vlaakith is sitting atop of a precarious throne where she must keep her people busy for fear that if they are allowed to pause or not indoctrinated deeply enough or hear murmurings of Prince Orpheus, that they will realise her deepest secrets. She betrayed Mother Gith, seized her throne, and has no clear idea about how Gith herself actually destroyed the Illithid Empire. Such a realization would mean the ruin of Vlaakith's empire, but even more terrifying to the Lich Queen, her death. This is why only the most powerful Githyanki are ascended and never seen again. Those Githyanki who prove their resilience and intelligence and wisdom are a threat to their queen instead of a commodity. Should they ever question her, they have the reputation and respect to bring others into apostasy. So, they are not ascended by Vlaakith. In reality, she saps their soul from them, absorbing their knowledge and destroying whatever's left. And so, the Githyanki who are patrolling in creche don't really have anything to do because they've not been taught how to have something to do apart from furthering Vlaakith's will. This strange liminal energy may also be the reason why almost all of the Githyanki in the creche can be found with food in their pockets. Simply put, they're bored. All they do is eat and wait. Now, Githyanki do need more nutrition when they're on the material plane in a creche than when they're on the astral plane due to their digestion being affected by the passage of time. Essentially, they don't really need to eat when they're on the astral plane because their bodies aren't changing that much, but on the material plane, they very much do. The raider mentality probably plays into the amount of food lying around too. They must be ready to flee, patrol, or assault ASAP, and have rations to sustain them along the way. All of that is epitomised by the description for Neogi claws, which you can find in one of the Ardent's pockets. A delicacy among the Gith residing on the astral plane, Neogi claws are roasted on hot coals and seasoned with whatever spices the latest raid brought in. They're spiced with whatever spices the latest raid brought in. Just think about that for a second. Githyanki use whatever's available and don't really cultivate their own distinct food culture. There are occupations equivalent to farmers for Githyanki, but they mainly cultivate mushrooms that can survive in the astral sea. So even though Neogi claws can be found in most Githyanki taste palettes, it always tastes different. For Githyanki, there's no such thing as a taste of home. 1492 DR saw a shake-up in creche. Thrasin was continuing her mandate to eliminate any Illithid threat in the vicinity of the creche. Youth Crunarel tells Tav that before they arrived, discovering what's happening in Moonrise Towers was our main focus. Thrasin employed mercenaries to scout Moonrise Towers. I know they're mercenaries because at the end of their message they say they're coming back to collect their pay, and a Githyanki being sent on scouting duty would do so out of duty and honour and all that rubbish that Vlaakith has indoctrinated them to believe. They wouldn't dream of asking for gold in exchange for what was expected of them. Also, sending a Githyanki to do a scouting job around Moonrise would raise immediate alerts and endanger the creche even more than it already is. A true soul catching a glimpse of a Githyanki nearby would immediately, unconsciously, inform the Elderbrain and therefore Ketheric Thorm, and they would know that counter-warfare tailored specifically to take down Mind Flayers is near, which would be of worry to a cult that's using an Elderbrain to control its cultists. So, the mercenaries sent were non-Githyanki, and reported back to Thrasin that there was Illithid activity at Moonrise. Before she could order an assault on the tower, Chikrai Rawargaz arrived at the creche. He is an Inquisitor, Vlaakith's eyes and ears, sent to put pressure on Thrasin to find the artefact that, unbeknownst to him and everyone else, housed Prince Orpheus, son of Vlaakith's mortal enemy and the one piece that could send her empire crumbling. Thrasin was openly displeased with the Inquisitor's visit. To her, it is folly. She reported the Illithid colony at Moonrise to Tunarath, but they sent an Inquisitor instead of permitting her to assault the tower, and wouldn't disclose what this artefact even was that Vlaakith wanted, or what it did. So, Thrasin is left in the dark about the significance of the artefact, and in the dark she stews. Early plans for Baldur's Gate 3 had a whole quest where you could ally with Kithrak Thrasin against the Inquisitor, potentially to get him to leave the creche. You could also double-cross Thrasin and tell Chikrai Wargaz that Thrasin was plotting against him in order to gain his favour, but this entire questline was cut. I found evidence of this quest in the Flags of a Baldur's Gate 3 dialogue parser, and I can only imagine what the rest of this quest would have entailed. Ironically, assaulting Moonrise Towers while Ketheric and the cult were distracted would have helped to neuter the illithid threat in Faerun. The Githyanki could have ridden dragons to the tower and burnt the Mind Flayer colony underneath Moonrise even deeper into the ground, destroying essential cult infrastructure and capturing Ketheric Thorm. The Cult of the Absolute has a formidable ground army, but their aerial defences are pitiful. A couple of red dragons, which Vlaakith would surely materialise, would make short work of the tower itself. Once imprisoned, Ketheric wouldn't be able to die because Dame Ailyn would still be imprisoned in the Shadowfell, which again I go over in my Wraithwind video, which I'm sure the Githyanki would have had a lot of fun with. Coddling Vlaakith's paranoia, it seems, is more important than actually eliminating any Geik. Gith youth were carrying out target practice on squirrels in Traelta Crags when they ran into absolute cultists on their way to Moonrise. The entire squad was destroyed by the Gith youth, an impressive feat, but the Githyanki didn't survive this attack. Their bodies are still lying among the dead squirrels, with the undead summoned by absolute cultists patrolling endlessly without any master to instruct them. The arrival of Chikrai Rawargaz creates an unsettling vibe in the creche. Everyone is on edge, terrified of the Inquisitor and his Ardents, but also that they might somehow have betrayed Vlaakith without even knowing it. Everyone is under investigation in a creche visited by a Chikrai, whether they are the intended target or not. Protocols aren't observed as strictly with such unease running throughout the creche. Lae'zel comments, "We are permitted to walk so freely. Such a lack of discipline would be punished severely in Kalea. We should have been disarmed on entry. I'm pleased we weren't, but it's strange." Everyone is on edge, and their anxiety is causing standards to slip. One of the many signs that the Inquisitor is hindering more than he is helping. And another way the Inquisition would have been insured against Tav's group killing them. Without their weapons, the fight would have been a lot more difficult, if not nigh on impossible. Ardent Karashk snidely comments that, considering this creche has a Kithrak under Inquisition, there's a lot of idle kin here, seemingly ignorant to the fact that their kin are idle because they are almost frozen in terror. However, there are signs that Chikrai Rawargaz is slightly desperate as well. He needs to find the artifact to please his queen, but eliminating Threzen too quickly robs him of a scapegoat if he fails. Ardent Karashk also says that Kithrak Threzen must be on her last chance by now. The Chikrai is not normally so lenient. He is only lenient because he needs someone to blame if he's unsuccessful. Through this we can see that each Gith is taking out their stress on the Gith below them. Warrior Eric notices that the Savage is running even stricter drills than usual for the Yankee, his anxiety about Vlaakith's eyes and ears manifesting in even stricter training than usual, so the Inquisitor sees him as above suspicion. For what? For anything. One warrior in the creche calls Voss a hero, and is swiftly reprimanded by an Ardent who spits out the word hero, warning that the term could be confused for istic, foreigner, sentimentality. Small rebellions are mounting in the creche, however. Val, the Githyanki boy being beaten by his teacher, is refusing to fight, having heard and internalised the story of Prince Orpheus. The slate that reveals the story of Prince Orpheus that Val found, I think, was deliberately planted to sow the story of Orpheus among the young Githyanki. Val says that when Voss visited the creche, his Savage made his students clean their armour, and he found the slate detailing Orpheus's story inside one of Voss's breastplates. It's a huge risk to take. What if the youth cleaning the armour, or anyone else, saw the slate and reported it to their own Kithrak? But the risk to Voss is worth it. With one Githyanki youth quietly spreading doubt about Vlaakith among his peers, an entire generation of Githyanki could be brought onto Orpheus's side and help bring down Vlaakith. Kithrak Threzen's own wolves are even contemplating rebellion. Dak the wolf is displeased at the amount of armour and cultists he is being made to eat. He's thinking of going on a hunger strike due to Threzen's poor treatment. Up on the roof of Rosymorn Monastery, an eagle has ousted a blue jay from their nest. the birds' feud presenting an uncanny reflection of the Githyanki exiling Lathander's faithful. A mural of Lathander provides one last consolation should Tav make it to Rosymorn's roof. The monks may be gone now, but their work endures. The morning Lord's light is still present in this image, and it feels like hope. That is the story of how Rosymorn Monastery became the ruin that Tav meets in Baldur's Gate 3. If you enjoyed this video, please do like and subscribe to my lore channel. You might not be aware, but I actually got made redundant earlier this year, so this is my full-time job at the moment, and I would dearly love to continue doing it. So if you'd like to support me in that endeavour, you can join my Patreon. Each tier gets you exclusive benefits. You can watch my videos ad-free and early, and at the slightly higher tiers you get an exclusive video each month, the topic of which you can vote on, as well as copies of all of my scripts for my videos for you to read at your own leisure. And now I am going to go and find out what my cats have been doing the entire time I've been recording this, because they have been suspiciously quiet. So I will see you lovely folks next time.